So the next step is to plan the stylized point, crease the dart line nearest the center front, cup, not cut, but cup the apex, fold and close dart, and you can use a pin to hold it in place. You use a piece of tape. So essentially, you're going to fold the dart leg closest to the center front, gets folded to the one further away. You can now fold it instead of keeping it as because this is now a 3D product. You can't really do anything with it, so you can fold it as it's indicating, and you can pin these together. When you pin them together, make sure that your waistline is a smooth line. You see that they connect. The waistline's not down here, and the other one's not way up here. This indicates, because some of you did not do this on your dart manipulations, this indicates that the dart legs are the same length. Essentially, by closing it and making sure that they match, indicates that the length from the vanishing point to the waistline is the same on both dart legs. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if this is 16.5 inches, that's 16.5 inches. If this is 5 inches and that's 4 inches, then you're going to have a disconnect for the dart. So closing it up and making sure that it matches indicates that they are equal. So you can fold it this way to deal with it, but they want you to sort of, I'm going to use a piece of tape and a tiny piece of tape. Maybe.
Bill, you fold it on the apex or the
Fold it on the dart leg. On the apex is how I have it folded now.
So fold it on the apex, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to, because we're creating shape, it's no longer flat. So I'm going to fold the dart, close it. I'm going to push it the opposite way. So now I have the waistline flat. Put it upside down. So now the waistline is flat on the table and I can work with it. So you'll note that the point doesn't go on the princess line, on the dart. If it were a princess line, it doesn't go there. So it goes in between while I'm making up a spot, like an inch over from there. And you can measure down 1 or 2 inches, depending on what you want, 1.5 inches if you want. Because again, that's just a design preference. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use your French curve, because I don't have an exact center front waist. True that up. And you'll see that in the little picture, it actually goes a little lower.
What's the measurement for that?
There isn't.
Oh, there isn't.
It's a design preference.
Oh.
Can I borrow your French curve for a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's done. Trace the style line over the dart, underlay to opposite side. So that is indicating that you are going to use your tracing wheel and trace over this so that your dart gets the same shape. I'm going to cut it so that you can see the result. that tape is then removed. You can see the shape that it creates on the bottom. Maybe not. So the next step that it has you do is to open the draft, pencil in the short lines of each side of the dart line. Mine are already done because I overextended them to begin with. You can also use if you see the illustration in there, they use the point of the dart, the one dart leg. So they aimed it towards the excess fabric here. Well, whatever you want. So now that this has been done, you are going to refer to the bolero style, the vest to develop the back. So the back is essentially, your front and your back need to be equal. So if I've taken it in on the back, I'm going to get another piece of paper. I'm going to measure in from the armhole 1/2 inch, because that's what I did on the front. On the neckline area, I'm going to measure in 1.5 inches because that's what I did. So if this is 4 inches when you're done, the back has to be 4 inches. You can't make this one a full size in the back and the front one smaller. So if you look at the picture that is on page 153 on that handout, you're going to see that whatever the inside is, whatever that distance is, I'm going to do it. I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches around the entire neckline. So it's going to be dropped. So again, like that princess line, if you do a princess line on the front, you're doing a princess line on the back. Before I move to the back exclusively, what I'm going to do is on here, I'm going to measure down about 1 inch. So I'm going to say that there's going to be a buttonhole here. And I'll measure up 1 inch from the waistline. And I'll find the center point between the two. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, let's say. So 2.5 plus that can't be right. Is this? That's 5.5, 5, 2, and that. So I found the center point. The other thing that you can do is, because this paper is what it is, you can go like this, you can go like that, and then, oh, there's the center. So this is where I'm going to establish my buttonholes. So it's 1 1/8 inches, so one is going to sit there. 1 1/8 inches, it's going to sit there. And 1 1/8 inches here. So now I have the button placement. I'm going to cut this out. So our neckline is now a V shape. Armhole was dropped. Armhole could be a square if you wanted it to. That was part of the design. So there's my front vest pattern. Well, it's not a pattern. There's my front vest. Ready for seam allowance. Sharpen your pencil. Take your back. Copy that off. So in the case of the textbook, you're going to see that they used a 2-dart back and they put 1 dart into the neckline. Like I said, you see this in vintage clothes. You saw it a lot in the past, in the 60s. Well, this book was from the 60s. So that's why you see it there. But you don't need it in the shoulder. So this one is a 1 dart, so I'm just going to use that instead. Copy that off. There's not much that gets done to this. It's all the front. Mark the dart. Bit of ease in there, bit of ease. So if you remember, 3 seconds ago, I said you're going to do what you did in the front. So we measured in 1.5 and then a 1/2 inch here. I'm going to measure down, true this up a little if it gets a little wonky. Measure down 1.5. It was 1.5. 1.5. 1.5. 1.5. And then with your French curve, you can. Did I give it back to you?
No, I just.
Oh. You can true it up. So that is what our back neckline is going to look like. We drop the armhole on the front 1 inch, so we drop the back armhole 1 inch. And then we can use our French curve to draw a new armhole. Obviously, it's not going to be one fell swoop. So I just sort of pushed it down. I think that's it. That's it. Easy, easy. So then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to establish notches. So measuring 3 inches up the armhole from the side seam, because we've eliminated, you can do a double notch. On the front piece, the same thing. Measure up 3 inches. And that's a single notch. What you're going to do, because this is now nothing, this is now nothing, is that you're going to create your, facings. Facings generally are 1.5 inches. Our shoulder seam here is a total of 3 inches. In this handout that I gave you, they make a facing for the front and they make a facing for the armhole. So they make a facing for the neckline and then they make one for the armhole. And you can do that. But essentially at the top, this is unlined. In this case, you're going to have fabric that hits right up, touching, in essence. Sometimes facings are all-in-one facings, which is what you did on that dress in Construction 1. Your favorite type of facing to do, no less. So let's say that my facing is 2 inches. it overlaps. And that would then add bulk. So do you see my back neckline facing overlaps the armhole facing? So if your facings were to be 2 inches, you would want them to be an all-in-one, incorporating both armhole and neckline. Construction 1, dress, all-in-one facing. So in that case, you would blend it to make it look pretty. So let's just say, I'm not gonna have you do this, but it is a possibility, because if you had a lining, then the lining would get attached to that bottom. So this would then blend from there to there, and this whole piece would be your facing. So in this book, they have you just do a 1-inch facing, and you'll see that they just get sewn on individually. So one on the neckline, one on the armhole, and they call it a day. So there's no flipping and turning, it's just a plain. It's very much like that sample that you did in construction 1 and construction 2 with the understitching. So I'm just simply measuring 1 inch. And much like you learned on that princess line today that I've had questions about, the grain line on this facing is parallel to the center back or the center front. So this is nothing. So now that we have a 1-inch facing, you can see that they don't touch each other, so you have a gap in there. So this would allow you to do it and not add a lot of bulk on the shoulder seam, because they're 2 separate pieces. The grain line on this piece is parallel to the center back. The grain line on here is right there, and the grain line on this one is there too. So they're running in the same direction. The grain line on this one on the armhole is parallel to the center back. So I'm going to say that it is 4 and you don't have to put the same number, but I'm just measuring equally the same distance. So the grain line on this facing piece on the arm is right there. Some of this will not be. This is all just a facing on top of the back draft. So they're going to be traced off separately. On the front, I've cut it out, which is no problem, but I will do the facings there. So on the front facing, well, on the armhole, we have 1 inch, because we had 1 inch on the back. You could do 1.5 if you want to make it a little more substantial. It doesn't have to be 1 inch. The more you put there, as long as they don't overlap, the more it will feel like you're sewing something on and not putting like a ribbon on something. But it's up to you. So I'm just going to measure equally around 1 inch, because that's what it was on the back. Again, because the back has it or the front has it, the other side will have it too. The grain line on here is going to be parallel to my center front, which is this line here. And then, again, I know it's upside down. The grain line is parallel to the center front for the facing. That'll get traced off into a separate piece. The facing on here, you want to sort of incorporate the, does it give you an actual number? No. It shows on the very last page the facings. So it says that they're shaping it, establish grain line, to develop pattern for this, no. Copy pattern, true row lines, complete pattern, follow seams, cut notches, open draft, develop back, in the facing. So I'm going to incorporate the buttonholes. And you don't want the facing to end at the buttonhole. So you don't want the facing here, so I'm just gonna measure from center front 2 inches. And as it comes up, I'm gonna say that it's 1.5. I'm sorry that it's upside down. Make it a little bit more substantial, because this is, I've made this up. 1.5 inches until I got to the center front, 2 inches away from it. So here's my center front. This is 2 inches where my grain line was. So that's going to be the basis for my this is for the facing. So I can just trace it off. But this can be a nice gentle curve and call it a day. So you can use a French curve, it doesn't have to be a point. So this will be the facing for the front piece, and this will be the facing for the armhole. So this should match the back one. Oh, it's 1 inch, right? You can thin it out. Or you can make the back one 1.5 inches, it's up to you. So I'm gonna go from 1 to 1.5 here. Or you can just keep it at 1.5 and then drop, make the facing for the back 1.5. So on a separate piece of paper, what you're going to do is you're going to copy off all of these patterns that are now on top of each other. This is where I, at home, will tape up the pattern onto a big window like that and use the sunlight. If you don't have if you can't read the paper. If you are using the brown paper to draft this on, then you're going to take your draft and place it on another piece of paper and use your tracing wheel to trace it out. Because you can't see through the paper. The beauty of the white paper is that you can see your lines through it. So all I really need to do is recopy it. The bottom also gets a facing. I didn't make it. You'll see it on the picture. You can mark the buttonholes for your facing. This would be the same fashion fabric as the outside of the garment, because it's a facing, it's not a lining. And there's my grain. Mark, mark, mark. So there's my front facing. I'm going to fill in that little gap. There's the point. Does anybody have any questions? Have I just overwhelmed you? The thing about the bottom facings is that the bottom facing is going to be, they show it in the, they show the front facing and the bottom facing being one piece. So you can continue it on. So that's 2 inches. So on the bottom, I'm gonna have to recopy it. You don't want the dart, is what I'm trying to get at. So the dart is closed. You're going to measure up. I'm gonna do 2 inches. And I'm going to make it look pretty in the end, so it doesn't look strangely. So you can just make that a straight line. But don't include the dart. The dart is useless. If you include the dart, then you need to cut it out. You need to copy this, cut it out, and then you would tape the dart closed because you would have a shape to mimic the shape of the waistline. Does that make sense? So I need to measure 2 inches, because this has nothing to do, the waistline size has something to do with it, but this has nothing to do. So if it's curved or not, it'll fit better if it mimics. But from this point, you can blend that in. So there would be my facing for the front. You could have it as a separate piece, but this just eliminates the need to sew it together. Armhole then gets its facing. Again, copy off your facing for your armhole, which in this case was 1 inch. You can make it 1 1/4. You can make it, let's see, you can make it a little bit larger, but the thing is that if you make it larger, you just need to make sure that they don't overlap there, because it really will add a lot of bulk. Or you can do an all-in-one facing, and then I know how much you guys love that. But it is a possibility if you just want to eliminate other issues that you might come across. Here's my grain line. Be a little more careful than I am with that. You can use your French curves. But there's your facing. At the bottom of your facing, you can add a 1/16 of an inch. So it's a little loose, but you don't want to change that. Actually, if you do it the opposite way, it'll stay in a little bit better. Sort of hugs it. Any questions? Is it possible what? Yeah.